And good morning, everyone. All About the Gyro here. Greetings to you from Nashville. I am filming this with about 4 hours left in time slot 2 of the iRacing Daytona 24-hour endurance race. So here I am at my dining room table this morning. I got my coffee, so hello to you. Dwayne here. Hope that you're well. And in this vlog, I wanted to talk about two things specifically. So the first thing is the issue that happened yesterday from an IT perspective, since I am an IT professional. And then what GTE car would I have driven or wanted to drive? So for those not aware, iRacing had 2 time slots. The first one started at about 8:15 Nashville time on Friday night. And then the big one was supposed to start at 7:45 in the morning, Nashville time, Saturday. Now, time slot 1 went off without issue. Time slot 2, however, had the major issues. So basically 7,000 people trying to get registered with 2,500 teams. And according to iRacing, the scheduler, which is a task, so that could be as simple as a cron job on a Linux server or a task in Task Scheduler in Windows, didn't fire off correctly. And because it didn't fire off correctly, it wasn't able to spawn all the sessions. And so there was a considerable delay in getting started. I think it was a 4-hour delay, something of that degree. So unfortunately for me, I was one of those that was affected. My team that I was racing with, Mountain Trout Racing Concerns, we sat down, discussed it, and at the time we had incomplete information. And we made the decision to withdraw from our attempt in the LMP2. So it took, I say, over 15 minutes. I think it was approaching more like 20 to 25 minutes for the sessions to fire off, but it happened. And to their credit, from most reports, once everything really got going, it stayed going. So, yay to that. But it leads to a couple of very important questions, I think. The first one, and yes, as per usual, the sinuses are flowing here in Middle Tennessee with all the weather changes. This is a known issue. It's something that has now become far too common in iRacing with special events, where they're unable to handle this max throughput at the point where it values most. Now, that could be a code issue, that could be a load balance issue, that could be a hardware limitation. We just don't know all the facts. My gut feeling on it is that it's a load balancing issue. the best way to understand what happened is picture your home. And if you have one or two people walking in the door all the time, they get in the door, there's not a lot of fuss. But now picture 7,000 people all trying to get through the door at the same time. And the system can't handle that because you have network connections that are based on certain timings. Now you're only able to get certain things in. And if the servers themselves, or in this case, maybe the master server, has so many socket connections and so many CPU threads, it may not have been able to handle it. So I do hope that iRacing provides a little bit more detail to understand where the break was in this. We'll see what happens. Let me be forthright and give them credit for issuing a $5 credit. That costs iRacing over $30,000 just in credits. And that should apply by the middle of next week. And that makes sense because they need to do root cause analysis. They need to figure out why that job didn't spawn. Now, my gut feeling on this is a bit of a middle-of-the-road approach. The salt that is now unfortunately common and expected, it's unnecessary. And you have a bunch of people that think they know better, and they don't. Simulation racing in general has had this exponential growth over the last year. And so things like this happen. And one of the points I read in the forums, which I fully agree with, was, okay, this one event had an issue, but all the other ones didn't throughout the year. It still meets 5.9 standards. Now, I agree with the sentiment, but it's not 5.9s. It's probably 3.9s because you have the planned down period. And what I'm referring to is 99% is 2.9s, 99.9% is 3.9s, and so forth. And they equate to uptime. And 5.9s is, I think it's something like 40 minutes or something like that. It's tiny, where that's your total downtime for the whole year. And that just doesn't happen because iRacing does religiously, I might add, regular maintenance and fixes. So how can you avoid this? Well, I think you now have to start doing pre-registration. And how you do pre-registration is time slot 1 had, I think I counted 11 splits. Time slot 2 was 47 splits, if I counted it right. So you see an asymmetry there. Time slot 1 didn't have any issues, it just went through. So for time slot 1, because keep in mind next year, you're going to have some people that say, hey, remember this, we need to get our race in and plan for it accordingly. So I expect time slot 1 to potentially double in terms of number of splits. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw 20 splits next year. Because people are going to remember this and all the hype and the excitement and then the big letdown. So what you do is you do the same for both time slots. Set registration for, I'm going to say 4 hours. In time slot 2, there may be an argument for 8 hours. But you have the concept. set up a longer registration time. On the back end, since you're leveraging all your different servers to run this, look at all your server farms, and you already have, in an unlisted state, active sessions. And what you do is you don't take the full 55. Take 40. Throw them into a practice session. The next 40, next 40, next 40. Now they're all sitting in the practice server, and you make the practice server not 2 hours. You make the practice server whatever it is, and you add 50%. So in this case, added 2 hours. So your practice server is 6 hours in duration. That's not hard to do because the European Endurance Series is 6 hours. So clone the parameter from that, expand it out, and call it good. Now, once the cutoff time, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, 1400 UTC occurs, stop your registrations. Now you've already pre-populated your servers. Now the only thing you got to do is start sorting and you already have exact counts because you have a server out there that's monitoring X number of LMP2s, X number of GT3s, X number of GTEs. Normally, GTEs is the largest pool. So the other part is you'll know through, because you have, in this case, 2,500 data points approximately, because that was, I think the number of teams that registered was at or very close to 2,500. The server has already done the averaging because that team was registered. And another benefit of the 4-hour window is because it's not yet official, you can deregister and change and things thereof and not get caught out by the fair share rules and the disqualification rules. But you've already got the averages calculated. So the server, once that team registers, has already put an ordinal rank on where you are at in both your class category and then overall. And now it becomes a very simple sorting exercise. Since GTE tends to be the popular class, you know you're going to have some all GTE splits at the bottom end. So look at the bottom end and go, okay, I have X number of LMP2s as it relates to this, because there isn't a lot of GT3 in comparison to the other two, but you work from the very top end and the very bottom end first, and you spawn those first 5 splits. So using 47 splits as an example, split 1, 2, 3, and split 46 and 47 are the first 5 sessions that go. Why is that? Well, they're the lowest hanging fruit. You get your very low all GTE split out the door, assuming you have sufficient numbers, of course. You get them going. Your top 3 splits, though, are those who are, in essence, giving you free advertising. So the Jimmy Brabant was in split 6, I think. But there were 10,000 people plus on YouTube waiting for that race to start. You go over to Twitch, you have Matt Malone, Dan Suzuki, RIP to him. He didn't get to drive the car because the car got wrecked. And, you know, the Uris of the world, the Lubos of the world, the Pablos of the world, etc. You get them going, now you quell the masses a little bit. So spin off your first 5 or 8 splits, depending on what the numbers are. what does that do? Well, at 55 entries, or as close to 55 entries, your 2,500 has now just dropped down by about 20%. So keep that in mind. 10% is 250 teams. Well, you divide that by 5 splits, that's 50 teams each. Now you got a pretty good distribution. You've now cut 20% of your load off. Then the hard part comes. Because the Jimmies of the world was in split 6, clearly there was enough distribution with LMP2s, GT3s, and GTEs at that level where you can whack off. But basically you do the next 5 splits off the top because you know what's left, and you get the next batch of 250 teams out the door. Now you have 10 splits. The key thing is not every session has to be ran at exactly the same time. Give yourself 15 minutes. Heck, give yourself half an hour for matching. People would be willing to wait, because when they start seeing the team count drop by a certain number and drop by a certain number, they know A, something is happening. B, they're linked in with Discord, YouTube, Twitch, and they go, oh, well, these sessions are spawning. That means there's something happening in the back end. And now you just work your way through both the bottom part and the top part, and you figure out where the nice spreads are, and then you just work both ends of the spectrum, and now you'll have the most even splitting of workload. And by doing it this way, you send that to a different farm. So you send one to your Boston farm, one to your West Coast farm, one over to Amsterdam, you send one to Tokyo, you send one to Brazil. You spread the load, and instead of this, hey, it's 10 minutes, what's going on? Now there's an expectation set, and that's the key point I want to emphasize. Set the expectation of, okay, registration ends here. We're going to start matching from this time interval to this time interval. Problem solved. This is what happens at bridge tournaments, especially the big ones. So here in Tennessee, we host one of the largest bridge tournaments in the world every year. This, of course, being pre-COVID, and that's in Gatlinburg. And there have been times where that first team event on Monday night, the knockout, everybody's in. There are hundreds of teams. And so they print out this, and they still use dot matrix printing for this, which is hilarious. They print out this gigantically long sheet, and now what they do is they want to make sure that the pros play together, but you also look at the bottom and go, okay, well, these are people that are social, they're new to the game, and they start working both ends of the list and narrow it down. And the last time I went to Gatlinburg, there were so many knockouts, the computer program couldn't handle it all. They had to use other methods to get all the results in. There was a code limitation. But there was that matching period, and it was an understood, hey, we're going to take half an hour to match everyone to get all the knockouts and the brackets sorted. But once it's done, it's done. iRacing should adopt the same policy. 2,500 teams, look at each split as a bracketed knockout. So that way you set a slack in it. I've given you a method that I think works effectively and efficiently for both server and network load, but also key point, user expectation. And in iRacing, a lot of people were saying, you're not communicating enough. I firmly disagree with that. And people that would claim hey, when there's a major outage, we would hear something every 30 minutes. That doesn't happen in our world. Trust me. I've been in IT 20 years. That just doesn't happen with the regularity that you think. iRacing, did they meet the minimum threshold of communication? That's to be debated. For the normal non-tech person, yes. I'm not the normal non-tech person. I wish they would have provided a little more detail. It gave some. It gave enough of an insight to go, okay, I can see what happened. But, yeah, at least they did. And they made an effort, and they put out an olive branch, and they were very careful how they worded it, because you could tell they were very frustrated as well. They knew there was going to be a lot of attendance, but I don't think they expected 2,500 teams in time slot 2. I just don't see that happening. And, that leaves, the Captain Obvious question, should there be a third time slot that is based for the Euros? And I think there's some argument for it. Because if you start the second time slot at, let's say, 08 or 0900 GMT, it doesn't affect your mixed continental teams as much. The team that I drove on had at least 2 confirmed Euros. I think there was a third Euro. So the North Americans would be driving in the 5 and 6 hour time deltas versus the Euros where they're getting sufficient rest. It's just the time shifting would just be done in a different order where, okay, the race, like here in Nashville, if it started at 0800 GMT, that's 2 a.m. in the morning here. Well, that works out pretty good because you drive in our team of 5, each driver gets 2 stints in the car, so you're 6 stints in at 38 minutes plus pit lane delta, so that puts you at 4 hours. Now it's 6 a.m. I'm up at 6:15 every day. This isn't that bad a thing. So what you could do is run your Euros again for the next 4 hours. So now you're 8 hours in, and now you bring in your North Americans to do the hard yards, because you only have 2 in this example, and they would have to go 2 stints, then 2 stints, and 2 stints, and 2 stints, and just do that back and forth to get you to the point where your Euros could take over again while they're resting. You could do this. This is not hard to do on a team of 5. Now, a team of 3, maybe a little harder. A team of 2, there's some people doing it with just 2 drivers. Props. And let me spare a thought to Mr. Aero HD and Chevette, I believe is the other handle. But there were people doing 24 hours for charity. Charity. Single-handed. I know in Mr. Aero's case, Keenan was doing it in the LMP too. Mad props. Seriously. Mad props. So I think pre-registration and a third time slot, and you solve this issue without too much difficulty. Now, the other part, what GTE would I have wanted to drive? Well, that answer is the Corvette. It's not the Porsche. It's not the Ferrari. It's not the BMW M8. I would have enjoyed driving the Corvette. Here's why. I drove all 4 cars around Daytona, and it was a very good education. The one plus I take from this is my GTE knowledge is better than it was prior to this. This is my first season in GTE, and of course my iRacing has done this, but it just started to flatten and go back up here at Daytona with all the practice and driving I was doing. The BMW M8. Russell Barnes, Finding Speed here on the YouTube, he flat out told me, this is not the best track for BMW. Be cognizant of that. And I agree with that. For Daytona, the BMW was clearly the baseline. No changes were made. But the BMW was the slowest car for me in the top end. Keep in mind, I used Craig's setup shops for all 4 of the cars to have a consistent shop basis. BMW with 2 degrees of wing and the required lower rake for me to get it around the kink without spinning it out over and over and over again. It was the slowest car for me. The oversteer in the rear was very disconcerting for me because it would come at the points where hard acceleration was required to get out of corners to get to the long straights that Daytona has. However, the M8 has really good brakes and really good front end feel. And next week is Suzuka for IMSA, one of the great circuits of the world. It tests everything out in the car, and I'm very curious to see how the BMW will sort itself versus the other 3. I think it's going to do a better job because Suzuka has every type of corner. It's over 3.5 miles long. I think it's 3.6 if memory serves. It tests everything out in the car. It is a fantastic place to find out strengths and weaknesses. So much so that if the good Lord said, I will give you 1 circuit to race on for the rest of your life, you could not race on any other circuit, that's the one I choose, Suzuka. No, not Spa, not Le Mans, not anywhere else. It's Suzuka because it is the consummate challenge, and I think it's a very hard circuit to get right over and over again. So in 4th place, the BMW. In 3rd, the Ferrari 488. I was the most consistent in the 488 in terms of lap times, but the brakes, especially when the track starts rubbering in and gets greasy, the brakes being weak would not be very good for me. It had also 3 degrees of wing. It had the most wing. It was only 1 miles per hour faster than the BMW for me. It has really good turn in. It's really good off corner. But the engine reduction, because of people saying I'm running out of fuel before my hour, thus causing need for extra pit stops, you never want anything taken away from you as a racer. You want things added to you. So I would put the Ferrari 3rd. 2nd place, the Porsche. Now, I've driven the Porsche all season, but the Porsche is very hard on its front tires. Yes, I still think it's the OP car in IMSA. I think at Suzuka, this is going to bear out. I think you're going to see just how much more classy the Porsche is vis-a-vis the other 3. Because Suzuka, with its setup, has a lot of similarities to Silverstone, with the big exception of that long straightaway at Suzuka versus a little bit shorter one, hanger straight at Silverstone. But when the track gets greasy and all that, the slight oversteer that the Porsche has Plus, if you're trying the double and triple stint tires, that front end, that third stint when the fuel's halfway down and you're trying to feel the front end, you're like, and it's a little scary. When the track gets warmer, I would be concerned about driving the Porsche fast and safe. And so that leaves the Corvette, and that's a big surprise for me. I didn't expect to enjoy the Corvette as much as I did, but yet I got P4 in my IMSA race. And the car is very forgiving. It has a very nice squat in the rear to where you can launch yourself off the corners. It's got plenty of horsepower. It had excellent top-end speed. It was the second fastest at top-end speed. In the Porsche, I was consistently hitting 187 miles per hour, so 300 kph. But the Vette was 185, 186 miles per hour, so about 296 to 298 kilometers per hour. So it was comparable. Both the Porsche and the Corvette had zero wing. So there was enough grip mechanically and aero to not have to add some drag to the rear to get the car around. And the two big corners of Daytona that really kind of separated these cars out for me, they go back to back, and that is the kink and then turn 5. Turn 6 would be a close third. The Corvette and the Porsche, you could take it flat out. The Ferrari, you breathe the throttle just a fraction, but pretty much all out. The BMW, as we know, we had to get the rear end lowered. Thanks to Josh Thompson for telling me, set it down 3 clicks. It's a little twitchy. I still had to lift noticeably, and cars that were not BMWs were able to gain a fair bit of time with this. But it's turn 5 that really showcases the 3 main things: the speed going into the corner, the braking into the corner, and then the actual corner itself. And the Corvette handles turn 5 better than the Porsche. The front end feel mid-corner off is so critical to get down to turn 6 where you have the same type of process. Turn 6 is a decreasing radius corner that opens up, and the same type of thing would happen. Once the car points straight, you hit the gas, and the rears would show you the rear instability of the car. The Corvette inspired confidence. The Corvette invites you to drive it to the limit. But similarly to the Ferrari 488, it tells you when you've crossed the limit. So yeah, I would have enjoyed driving the Corvette in the 24 hours of Daytona if I had chosen to drive GTE. So that is going to conclude part 1 of vlog 4. Now, part 2, I'm going to discuss the general mindset that I use for endurance racing, because in a few weeks, the Bathurst 12 Hours for GT3 will be hosted on iRacing, and I'm definitely keen to drive in that event. Now, in which GT3? Well, right now it seems like the McLarens and the Audis are the OP, because they will use VRS Sprint, I believe, so those 7 cars. So there'll be some prep work going into that. But yeah, it's been a very interesting weekend. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe, both here on Twitch and on YouTube. You know the drill. And make sure you take care of yourself. Take care of one another. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.